The coughing started at exactly 3:47 a.m. I lay perfectly still in my bed, listening to the wet, rattling sound echoing through the thin walls from my stepmother's room. Each hack was followed by a desperate wheeze, the kind that came from lungs slowly filling with fluid. In my past life, I would have been at her bedside within seconds, my medical bag in hand, ready to ease her suffering with the knowledge that had earned me the title of miracle doctor. This time, I pulled my blanket higher and smiled in the darkness. Mei Ying, her voice cracked between coughs. Mei Ying, come here. I didn't move, let her call, let her suffer the way she'd let me suffer when I was dying alone in that hospital bed 3 months ago. Or was it 3 months from now? Time became strange when you died at 28 and woke up again at 18, with 10 years of future memories burning behind your eyes. The coughing intensified, and I heard my father's heavy footsteps in the hallway. He paused outside my door, and I could picture him there, debating whether to knock. In my previous life, he would have barged in, demanding I help his wife. But things were different now. I was different now. Mei Ying, your mother needs you, he called through the door, his voice careful, almost pleading. She's not my mother, I replied calmly, and I'm not a doctor. Silence stretched between us before his footsteps retreated. I heard him on the phone, probably calling Dr. Chen from the district hospital. Good luck with that. Dr. Chen couldn't diagnose a common cold correctly, let alone the rare autoimmune condition that was slowly destroying my stepmother's respiratory system. I knew because I'd watched it happen before, in that other timeline where she'd recovered only because I'd spent 3 sleepless nights researching her symptoms and formulating the precise treatment that saved her life. The same woman who 2 years later would forge my signature on documents to steal my inheritance. The same woman who would spread rumors about my mental instability to have me removed from my position at the hospital. The same woman who would watch from the doorway as my stepsister Lynn deliberately contaminated my IV line, leading to the sepsis that killed me. But that was then. This was now. And now, I was 18 again, 3 days after my high school graduation, with 10 years of medical knowledge that technically didn't exist yet, and a heart that had turned to stone. The morning sun was just beginning to filter through my window when I heard Lynn's voice in the hallway. What's wrong with Mom? She sounds terrible. Your sister won't help, my father said, his tone accusatory. Why should she? Maying doesn't know anything about medicine. She's just being dramatic again, trying to get attention. If only she knew. In my previous life, by this age, I had already been secretly studying medical texts, driven by a desperate need to understand my own mother's death when I was 7. By 28, I had become the youngest department head in the country's most prestigious hospital, had published papers on rare diseases, had saved hundreds of lives, including theirs. I rose from my bed and dressed carefully in simple clothes. Today was important, though none of them knew it yet. Today was the day that, in my previous life, I had made the mistake of revealing my medical knowledge to save my stepmother. Today was the day I had foolishly believed that saving her life would finally make them love me. How naive I had been. I walked into the kitchen where my father sat hunched over his phone, his face gray with worry. Lynn was making tea, her movements sharp and angry. She looked up when I entered, her pretty face twisting with familiar disdain. Finally decided to grace us with your presence? She snapped. Mom's been sick all night. I heard, I said, pouring myself a glass of water. And you didn't think to help? To at least bring her some water or medicine? What medicine? I asked innocently. I'm not a doctor. I wouldn't know what to give her. Lynn slammed the teacup down. You could have shown some basic human decency. Like the decency you all showed me when I had pneumonia last winter? I asked quietly. When I was burning with fever for 3 days and no one even brought me a glass of water? That was different, my father said automatically. You weren't that sick. My temperature was 104 degrees. You're exaggerating as always, Lynn said. Besides, Mom had that important company event. She couldn't miss it just to play nurse. I nodded slowly. Of course, how silly of me to expect family to care for family. The sound of retching came from upstairs, followed by more violent coughing. My father jumped up, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm taking her to the hospital, he announced. Good idea, I said, though you might want to go to Riverside General instead of District. Their emergency department is better equipped. He paused at the doorway. How would you know that? I shrugged. I read it online. What I didn't tell him was that Riverside General was where Dr. Marcus Zhao worked, the only physician in the city who might recognize the early symptoms of hereditary pulmonary alveolar proteinosis. In my previous timeline, it had taken 6 months and my intervention before my stepmother was correctly diagnosed. This time, if they were lucky, Dr. Zhao might catch it in time. Or he might not. It wasn't my concern anymore. After they left for the hospital, taking Lynn with them, I sat alone in the quiet house and let myself remember everything. The memories came in waves, each one sharp and bitter. I remembered the day my real mother died. I was 7, and she had been sick for months with what the doctors dismissed as general weakness. My father had already started seeing Zhang Wei, my future stepmother, by then. He was too busy with his new romance to notice how my mother's symptoms worsened whenever she ate the special herbal soup Zhang Wei so kindly brought over. It wasn't until years later in medical school that I learned about chronic thallium poisoning and recognized the symptoms I had watched destroy my mother. I remembered my 8th birthday, the first one after my mother's death. Zhang Wei had officially moved in by then, bringing Lin, who was only a year younger than me. There was a party, but it wasn't for me. It was Lin's welcome to the family celebration that just happened to fall on my birthday. I spent the day in my room, forgotten, while everyone fawned over the pretty new daughter. I remembered high school when I won the national science competition, an achievement that should have guaranteed me a spot at any university I wanted. But Zhang Wei convinced my father that the prize money should go toward Lin's piano lessons because the arts are more suitable for girls than hard sciences. I watched Lin waste that money, quitting piano after 3 months to pursue painting, then quitting that for dancing, then quitting that too. I remembered medical school, which I had to finance myself through scholarships and working 3 jobs, because my father claimed he couldn't afford to support 2 daughters' education, even though Lin's art degree at a private college cost 4 times more than my medical degree at a public university. I lived on instant noodles and 4 hours of sleep, studying in the library until my eyes burned, while Lin posted photos from her European graduation trip. I remembered my residency, the 100-hour weeks, the constant exhaustion, the way my hands would shake from fatigue as I sutured wounds at 3 in the morning. And through it all, the family never once acknowledged my achievements. When I graduated top of my class, they didn't attend the ceremony. When I performed my first successful surgery on a child with a rare heart defect, saving her life, they said I was showing off. When I was featured in a medical journal for my innovative treatment protocol, Zhang Wei told everyone I had probably slept with the editor. But the worst memories were of the times I helped them, despite everything, like when Lin developed a mysterious rash that covered her entire body. The dermatologists were baffled, suggesting everything from psoriasis to lupus. I spent my only day off in weeks researching, eventually diagnosing her with a rare reaction to the illegal skin whitening cream she'd been secretly using. I created a treatment plan that cleared her skin completely in 2 weeks. She thanked me by telling everyone I had caused the rash in the first place out of jealousy. Or when my father's business partner tried to poison him during a crucial merger negotiation. I recognized the symptoms of arsenic poisoning in time, proved it with tests I ran myself, and saved not just his life but his entire company. He thanked me by transferring my mother's inheritance, money she had specifically left for me, into an account controlled by Zhang Wei for safekeeping. Or when Zhang Wei herself was diagnosed with early-stage liver cancer during what should have been a routine checkup. The oncologist recommended immediate surgery, but I knew from her symptoms that the tumor was a rare benign adenoma being misread on the scans. I fought the entire medical board, risked my license, and proved I was right. The surgery would have killed her. The adenoma was wrapped around a major artery in a way the scans hadn't shown. Instead, I developed a treatment plan that shrunk the growth without invasive procedures. She was so grateful that she waited exactly 1 month before beginning her campaign to destroy my career. The destruction was methodical and cruel. First came the whispers, that I was unstable, that I had been caught self-medicating, that I had made critical errors that were covered up. None of it was true, but Zhang Wei had connections, and she knew exactly how to plant doubt. Then came the forged documents, papers with my signature authorizing treatment protocols I had never seen, prescriptions for controlled substances I had never written. When I tried to defend myself, Lynn provided tearful testimony about my erratic behavior at home, my violent outbursts that never happened, my drug problem that didn't exist. The final blow came when I was suspended pending investigation. I knew I could fight it, could prove my innocence eventually, but I was so tired. 10 years of fighting for every scrap of recognition, of pouring my soul into saving lives while my own family worked to destroy me. It had hollowed me out. When I developed a simple infection from a cut on my hand, my immune system, weakened by years of stress and poor self-care, couldn't fight it off. It progressed to sepsis with shocking speed. I lay in that hospital bed, burning with fever, organs failing one by one, and they came to visit exactly once. Not to comfort me, but to ask about my research notes. Jung Wei wanted to know where I kept my files on rare disease treatments. She had a friend whose daughter needed help. Lynn wanted my apartment key because she had her eye on my location. My father wanted to know if I had any life insurance policies. I died alone at 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. My last thought, a bitter prayer, that if there was any justice in the universe, I would get a chance to show them what it felt like to need help and be denied. And then I woke up, 10 years in the past, 18 years old again, with all my medical knowledge intact and a heart frozen solid by betrayal. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all. The phone rang, interrupting my dark reverie. My father's number flashed on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "The doctors can't figure out what's wrong with her," he said without preamble, his voice tight with panic. "They're running tests, but she's getting worse. The attending physician wants to admit her, but he doesn't seem to know what he's doing. Meiying, I know you've been reading medical things online. Is there anything at all you might have come across that could help?" In my previous life, this was the moment I broke. This was when I rushed to the hospital, diagnosed her condition within hours, and spent the next 3 days creating a treatment protocol that would save her life. This was when I proved my worth and earned nothing but more contempt. "I'm sorry, Father," I said calmly. "I'm just a high school graduate. I wouldn't know where to begin with something like that. I hope the doctors figure it out soon." I hung up before he could respond. The next 3 days passed in a strange blur. I went through the motions of normal life, eating, sleeping, reading. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed constantly with updates from the hospital. Jung Wei's condition deteriorated steadily. The fluid in her lungs increased. Her breathing became more labored. The doctors tried antibiotics, assuming pneumonia. They tried steroids, thinking it might be an allergic reaction. They tried diuretics to clear the fluid. Nothing worked. On the 4th day, Lynn called me directly. Her voice had lost all its usual arrogance, replaced by genuine fear. "She's dying, Meiying. The doctors are talking about putting her on a ventilator. Please, if you know anything at all that might help." I told Father I'm not a doctor. "Stop being such a bitch," Lynn screamed into the phone. "This is our mother we're talking about." "Your mother," I corrected. "My mother died when I was 7, remember? The woman you and Zhang Wei used to joke about? The one whose jewelry Zhang Wei wears? The one whose photos she threw away?" Lynn was silent for a moment, then quieter. "That's in the past. We're family now." "We were never family," I said. "Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't spread lies to destroy careers. Family doesn't stand by and watch while someone dies alone." "What are you talking about? You're not making sense." Of course she didn't understand. In this timeline, those betrayals hadn't happened yet. But I remembered every one of them, and that was enough. "Ask the doctors to test for hereditary pulmonary alveolar proteinosis," I said finally. "I read about it in a medical journal once. The symptoms match." It was more than I had planned to give them, but I wasn't completely heartless. I gave them the diagnosis, but not the treatment. Let them figure out the rest. I found out later that it took the doctors another 2 days to confirm the diagnosis, and even then, they struggled with the treatment. The standard protocol wasn't working because, as I knew from my previous life's research, Zhang Wei had a rare genetic variant that made her resistant to the usual medications. Without my specific formulation, which involved a combination of treatments that wouldn't be standard practice for another 5 years, she would continue to deteriorate. She survived, barely. The damage to her lungs was permanent. She would need oxygen therapy for the rest of her life, would never be able to climb stairs without gasping for breath, would spend her remaining years tethered to machines. The woman who had prided herself on her appearance, who had spent my mother's money on clothes and cosmetics, was now hollow-eyed and gray-skinned, aged 20 years in a matter of weeks. But I was just getting started. 2 months after Jungwei's illness, I enacted the next part of my plan. In my previous life, I had discovered by accident that Lynn had a rare genetic condition, familial Mediterranean fever, that remained dormant unless triggered by specific factors. One of those triggers was a particular combination of foods, shellfish and red wine, consumed within a short time frame. The reaction wouldn't be immediate, but would build over repeated exposures until it reached a critical point. Lynn had developed a taste for expensive seafood dinners since Jungwei had recovered enough to return home. Every Friday, she would go out with her friends to the most exclusive restaurants, posting photos of oysters and champagne, lobster and wine. I made sure to like every photo, to comment on how delicious everything looked, to encourage her indulgence. It took 6 weeks before the first attack hit. I was in my room studying for the medical school entrance exam because this time I would do things properly, would build my career without their interference. When I heard Lynn scream from the bathroom, I knew exactly what was happening. The severe abdominal pain that felt like being stabbed with hot knives, the fever that would spike to dangerous levels, the inflammation that would spread through her body like fire. My father banged on my door. "Something's wrong with Lynn. She's in agony." I opened the door, my face a mask of concern. "What are her symptoms?" "Stomach pain," she says. "She's burning up." "Probably food poisoning," I suggested. "She did go out for seafood tonight. Maybe it was bad." It wasn't food poisoning, of course. It was the beginning of a cascade of inflammation that, left untreated, would lead to chronic arthritis, kidney problems, and years of debilitating pain. In my previous life, I had diagnosed Lynn's condition early and created a management plan that prevented these complications. This time, I watched her suffer through misdiagnosis after misdiagnosis, appendicitis, Crohn's disease, lupus, while her condition worsened. The attacks came regularly after that, each one more severe than the last. Lynn spent more time in the hospital than out of it. Her Instagram posts changed from champagne brunches to IV drips, from designer shoes to compression socks. Her friends gradually stopped visiting. The modeling contract she had been so proud of was canceled. The rich boyfriend she had been dating disappeared when he realized she was now a chronic patient rather than a trophy girlfriend. At 3 months into Lynn's illness, my father's health began to fail as well. This one, I hadn't planned. It was pure karma, or perhaps the universe's way of completing the circle. He developed the exact same heart condition that had killed his father, my grandfather, 15 years ago. A condition that was completely treatable if caught early, but my father had always been too proud and too busy to get regular checkups. The first sign was the shortness of breath when he climbed stairs. Then came the swelling in his ankles, the fatigue that hit him like a wall every afternoon, the irregular heartbeat that would wake him at night. I watched him hide these symptoms just as he had hidden his father's illness from me when I was young, not wanting to appear weak. In my previous life, I had forced him to get tested, had caught the condition before permanent damage was done. I had personally overseen his treatment, adjusting medications with precision, monitoring his progress daily. He had recovered completely, his heart function returning to normal within a year. This time, when he finally collapsed at work and was rushed to the emergency room, the damage was already extensive. His ejection fraction, the measurement of how much blood the heart pumps with each beat, was below 20%. Normal is above 50. Below 30 is considered severe heart failure. "Why didn't you tell anyone you were feeling sick?" I asked him as he lay in the hospital bed, gray-faced and struggling to breathe even with oxygen support. "I didn't want to worry anyone," he wheezed, "with your mother and Lynn already sick." "Zhang Wei is not my mother," I said automatically. He looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. "You've changed, Meiying. You're different." "People change," I said simply. "The doctors say I need surgery. A bypass, maybe a transplant eventually if things don't improve." His voice was small, frightened. "I don't understand how this happened so fast. My father had the same thing, but he had years before it got this bad. Your father had a daughter who noticed his symptoms early and forced him to get treatment, I said quietly. He frowned, confused. But you were just a child when he died. You couldn't have. I meant his daughter, your sister, Aunt May. She tried to get him help, but you insisted he was fine, that she was overreacting. You didn't want to spend money on doctors when the factory was struggling. The truth hit him like a physical blow. I watched him remember how his sister had begged him to take their father to the hospital, how he had refused, citing financial concerns and his father's own stubbornness, how his father had died 2 weeks later, drowning in fluid from congestive heart failure. That's not, I didn't, but he couldn't finish the lie. Choices have consequences, I said. You chose the factory over your father. You chose Zhang Wei over my mother. You chose Lin's wants over my needs. And now your heart is failing, the same way your father's did, the same way mine did when I spent years destroying my health to become someone you might finally be proud of. I left him there with that truth, returning home to the empty house that felt more like mine than it ever had when it was full. The next phase of my plan involved the family business. In my previous timeline, I had saved it multiple times. First from the poisoning incident, then from an embezzlement scheme by the chief accountant, and finally from a hostile takeover attempt. Each time, I had used my connections in the medical world, my reputation, and my problem-solving skills to protect the company that should have been my inheritance. This time, I simply watched it burn. The embezzlement had already begun. Mr. Chen, the trusted accountant who had worked for my father for 15 years, had been siphoning money for the last 3. In my previous life, I had discovered this during a casual review of the books when my father was first hospitalized. I had exposed Chen, recovered most of the money, and implemented new oversight systems. Now, with my father in the hospital fighting for his life, Zhang Wei barely functional on her oxygen tank, and Lin in and out of emergency rooms, no one was watching the company. Chen grew bolder, his theft more flagrant. Suppliers went unpaid while Chen's offshore accounts swelled. Employee salaries were delayed while Chen bought himself a new Mercedes. I received a call from my father's assistant, Mrs. Liu, who had always been kind to me. Maying, I'm sorry to bother you, but your family's situation, the company is in trouble. Mr. Chen hasn't paid the suppliers in 2 months. They're threatening to sue. Without your father here, no one knows what to do. Could you perhaps... I'm 18 years old, Mrs. Liu. I don't know anything about running a business. But you're so smart. You always were. Maybe you could look at the books just to see if something seems wrong? In another life, I had said yes. This time I said, I'm sorry. I need to focus on my studies. I'm sure Mr. Chen has everything under control. The company collapsed within 4 months. The suppliers sued, the employees quit. The factory was seized for unpaid debts. Chen disappeared with 3 million yuan, leaving behind falsified records that implicated my father in tax evasion. If my father hadn't been lying in a hospital bed with a failing heart, he would have been arrested. The house had to be sold to pay legal fees and medical bills. The cars were repossessed. The designer clothes and jewelry Zhang Wei had accumulated over years of spending my mother's money were sold for a fraction of their cost. Lin's piano, which had been bought with my competition prize money, went for barely enough to cover a week of her treatment. They moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, 3 rooms for 3 broken people. Zhang Wei needed constant care but couldn't afford a nurse. Lin was in too much pain to help. My father, released from the hospital but still weak, struggled to care for them both while fighting legal battles over the company's collapse. And where was I during all this? I was thriving. I had aced the medical school entrance exam, scoring the highest marks in the province. Without the family drama to distract me, without spending my energy saving them from themselves, I focused entirely on my studies and my future. A full scholarship to the country's top medical university, plus a special grant for exceptional students that covered living expenses. I moved into a dormitory room that was smaller than my old bedroom, but felt like a palace because it was mine alone. I made friends who valued me for my mind, not what I could do for them. I joined research groups where my insights were celebrated, not dismissed. I published papers that had my name and mine alone as the author. But the universe wasn't done with its justice yet. 6 months after I started medical school, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Lynn, calling from a hospital payphone. Meiying, please, I know you hate us, but please. Mom is dying. The doctors say her lungs are failing completely. She needs a transplant, but we're not compatible donors. You're the only one who might be a match. Please, I'm begging you. I'm not a match, I said simply. You haven't even tested. I don't need to. I have a rare blood type mutation. I discovered it during a biochemistry lab. I'm not compatible with anyone in our family. It was a lie, of course. I was a perfect match. In my previous life, I had been ready to donate part of my lung to save her when her condition had deteriorated after years of poor management. But she had recovered just enough with treatment to avoid the transplant. This time, without proper care from the beginning, her lungs were too damaged. Then help us find another way. You're in medical school now. You must know something, anything that could help. I'm a first-year student, Lynn. I'm learning basic anatomy. I'm not qualified to give medical advice. You gave advice before. You diagnosed her condition. I made a lucky guess based on something I read, that's all. Lynn was sobbing now. She's going to die, Meiying. She's going to die, and you could save her if you wanted to. How can you be so cruel? I learned from the best teachers, I said, and hung up. Zhang Wei died 3 weeks later. I didn't attend the funeral. I was told later that only a handful of people came. The family that had once commanded respect in social circles had fallen too far. Lynn gave a eulogy through her tears, talking about what a wonderful mother Zhang Wei had been, how she had sacrificed everything for her daughters. Daughters, plural. Even in death, they were trying to claim me. My father lasted another year. The heart surgery had been partially successful, but the stress of Zhang Wei's death, the loss of the company, and the constant legal battles weakened him beyond recovery. He spent his last months in a charity ward, the kind of place he had once donated to for tax breaks while looking down on the patients there. I visited him once near the end. He was skeletal, his skin gray and paper-thin, machines keeping him alive. His eyes, when they found mine, were full of something I had never seen in them before. Understanding. I know, he whispered. Know what? What we did to you, what we took from you, your mother, she would have been ashamed of me. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. Is this karma? He asked. Is this punishment for how we treated you? This is consequence, I said. Every choice has one. You chose to neglect your health while managing everyone else's life. You chose to ignore symptoms that your father displayed before his death. You chose to trust the wrong people with your company. These are the results of your choices. And you? His voice was barely audible. Did you choose to let us fall? I chose to stop catching you. He closed his eyes. I'm sorry, Meiying, for everything. I know it's too late, but I'm sorry. Perhaps he was. Perhaps facing death had given him clarity. Or perhaps he was just afraid of dying alone, the way my mother had. Either way, I felt nothing. The part of me that could have forgiven him had died in that hospital bed in another timeline, burned away by fever and betrayal. He died 2 days later. Lynn called to tell me, her voice hollow and defeated. There's no money for a proper funeral, she said. The creditors took everything. I don't know what to do. Cremation is simple and dignified, I suggested. Will you help with the costs? I'm a student on scholarship. I have no money to spare. You're heartless, she said. But there was no heat in it. She was too broken to fight. I'm practical, I corrected. Something this family never was. Lynn ended up in a chronic care facility, her condition requiring constant management she couldn't afford. The familial Mediterranean fever had progressed to amyloidosis, proteins building up in her organs, slowly shutting them down. With proper treatment from the beginning, it could have been prevented. Now it was irreversible. I graduated medical school at the top of my class, years of future knowledge allowing me to excel beyond even my professor's expectations. I specialized in rare diseases, becoming known for my ability to diagnose conditions others missed. My reputation spread quickly, the young doctor who could solve impossible cases. But I was selective about my patients, very selective. When the wealthy businessman who had helped my father destroy my uncle's company came seeking treatment for his son's mysterious illness, I referred him elsewhere. When the judge who had ruled against my mother's family in the inheritance dispute developed symptoms no one could explain, I was too busy to consult. When Zhang Wei's sister, who had stood by and watched as my mother's possessions were sold off, begged me to save her husband, I expressed my sincere regrets that my schedule was full. I saved others, though, hundreds of them, children whose parents loved them truly, elderly people who had lived with kindness, young adults fighting to build better lives. For them, I was the miracle doctor everyone said I was. For those who had shown cruelty to the innocent, I was conveniently unavailable. 5 years after Zhang Wei's death, I received an unexpected visitor. An elderly woman, elegant despite her age, waited in my office. It took me a moment to recognize her, my maternal grandmother, whom I had been told died when I was young. "You're not dead," I said, too shocked for politeness. She smiled sadly. "No, though your father certainly wanted everyone to believe that. He cut me off from you after your mother died. Said I was a bad influence, that I would fill your head with lies about him and that woman. Why didn't you fight for me?" "I tried, but I was old, poor, and he had lawyers. By the time I had saved enough money to challenge him, you were already in medical school. I thought you were happy. It was only when I heard about what happened to them all that I wondered." She studied my face, and I saw recognition dawn in her eyes. Not of my features, but of something deeper. "You knew, didn't you?" she whispered. "Somehow you knew what they did to your mother." "I suspected," I said carefully. "The soup," she said. "That woman's special soup. I tried to tell the police, but there was no proof. The cremation happened so quickly." "Thallium," I said quietly. "Tasteless, odorless, accumulates slowly. Causes exactly the symptoms mother had." My grandmother's eyes filled with tears. "You did know, and they all got sick, one by one. The newspapers called it a curse, the family that lost everything, but it wasn't a curse, was it? They got sick because they ignored their symptoms, refused preventive care, and made poor lifestyle choices," I said evenly. "I had nothing to do with their medical conditions." She looked at me for a long moment, then reached across the desk to take my hand. Her skin was paper soft, warm. "Your mother would be proud of you," she said. "Not for what you did to them, but for what you've become despite them." We built a relationship after that, my grandmother and I. She told me stories about my mother I had never heard, showed me photos my father had claimed were lost. She had been saving them for 30 years, hoping to one day share them with me. I bought her a house near mine, hired caregivers to ensure her comfort, gave her the granddaughter she had been denied for so long. She lived another 6 years, peaceful years full of the love that had been stolen from both of us. Lynn outlived her, though barely. I heard through medical colleagues that she had been asking for me, begging anyone who would listen to bring me to her. She wanted forgiveness, they said. She wanted to make peace before the end. I was in surgery when she died, saving the life of a child whose parents had driven through the night to bring her to me. The child lived. Lynn didn't. The timing was coincidental, but somehow perfect. The last I heard, Lynn had been buried in an unmarked grave in the public cemetery. No one left to pay for a headstone. The Zhang family line had ended with her, their legacy nothing but debt and bitter memories. And me? I continued to rise. I became the head of the rare disease department at 30, the same age I had been when I died in that other timeline, but this time with no one to tear me down. I published groundbreaking research, developed new treatment protocols, saved lives that others had written off as hopeless. I bought a beautiful house with a garden, something I had always dreamed of, but could never afford while supporting my ungrateful family. I traveled to conferences around the world, my expertise sought after by the global medical community. I had friends who valued me, colleagues who respected me, and a life that was entirely my own. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about that other timeline, the one where I had given everything to save people who despised me for it, where I had burned myself out trying to earn love that was never available, where I had died alone, abandoned by those I had sacrificed everything to protect. This timeline was better, not kinder perhaps, but more just. I stood at my office window, watching the sunset over the city. In my hand was a medical journal featuring my latest research on the cover, a treatment protocol that would save thousands of lives. On my desk was a photo of my mother and grandmother, both smiling, both at peace. The phone rang, another patient, another life to save. But this time, I would choose who was worthy of saving. This time, I would protect my gift instead of wasting it on those who would destroy me for it. I had been reborn with the knowledge of a miracle doctor, but more importantly, I had been reborn with the wisdom to know that not everyone deserved miracles. Some people deserved exactly what they gave to others, nothing. And as I picked up the phone to hear about another rare case that needed my expertise, I smiled. The young mother on the other end of the line was crying, begging for help for her child, promising anything if I could just save her baby. I heard love in her voice, real love, the kind my mother had felt for me, the kind Zhang Wei had never been capable of. Bring her in immediately, I said. I'll be waiting. This child I would save. This mother I would help. This family, who loved each other truly, deserved the miracle of my knowledge. As for those who had watched me die alone in another life, they had already received exactly what they deserved. The same cold indifference they had shown me, reflected back at them when they needed warmth the most. The universe, I had learned, was not cruel. It was simply precise in its justice. And sometimes, the greatest revenge was not in actively destroying those who had wronged you, but in simply refusing to save them from themselves. And I had been reborn as a miracle doctor, but miracles, I had decided, were only for those who deserved them. And my family? They had proven, over and over again, that they deserved nothing from me but the silence of my turned back and the echo of my footsteps walking away. The story of my revenge was not written in dramatic confrontations or elaborate schemes. It was written in every diagnosis I didn't share, every treatment I didn't provide, every miracle I refused to perform. It was written in their gasping breaths and failing organs, in their desperate pleas and empty bank accounts, in their slow realization that the daughter they had dismissed as worthless had been the only thing standing between them and destruction. They had wanted me to be nothing, and so I became nothing to them. No savior, no support, no safety net. Just a stranger with the power to save them who chose, with absolute clarity and no regret, to let them fall. And in their falling, I found my rising. In their sickness, I found my health. In their destruction, I found my construction of a life worth living. This was my story, not of the miracle doctor who saved everyone, but of the woman who learned that the greatest power sometimes lies not in what we do, but in what we refuse to do. Not in the hands that heal, but in the hands that stay still. Not in the hearts that forgive, but in the hearts that remember. I was reborn, and I refused to be their miracle, and in that refusal, I finally found my own.